Hello, my name's Ian Peel, and I'm going to tell you about my memories of Newark football when I was growing up. Lots of interesting times and lots of famous people, good footballers, good local footballers. Some of them who are unfortunately no longer with us. So my first experience with playing football was at Balderton Primary School, where I was part of the team, and the best player in the team at that time was a guy called Brian Nixon, who went on to be a professional at Nottingham Forest. So I'm now talking about the mid-1950s. I was born in 1947, so yeah, about 1957, 58. Brian went on to be a professional at Nottingham Forest. I don't think he made the first team, but he did make his name at Grantham Town. Grantham Town at the time were giant killers in the FA Cup, and I remember going and watching them play, and they beat a number of Football League teams at the time. And one of the guys who he played with, his name was Dennis Genus, and in fact he's the father of Jermaine Genus, who's on the television nowadays. Then my next memory was, as I was a bit older, must have been 12, maybe 13. And my dad worked at Ransom & Miles, and he was friendly with the secretary of the Ransom & Miles Football Club. So they got me a season ticket. So I used to go to the home games, and I used to travel on the bus with the team to the away games. And one of my pals, David Freeman, commonly known as Bucket Freeman, he was the mascot in those days. And Ransom & Miles had a terrific team. I think they paid their players, and some came from London to play. And I can still remember a lot of the team names. In goal was a guy called Colin Goddard, Codge, who I went on to play cricket with in Balderton, and he's a good pal of mine. There used to be a guy called Alan Sentence, played right back. George Hugel played centre half. Rolly Richardson played left half in those days, midfield now. A guy called Brian Burton, who came from London, played on the wing. Centre forward called Chris Brooks, who came from London. And then we got a centre forward from Southwell. His name was Joe Boucher, and he became very, very good and played at a very high level. Didn't play league football, but he played an extremely good level of amateur football, along with his brother, who was called Willie Boucher. My good friend Alan Burkitt, Ginger Burkitt, he played on the wing a couple of times, and so did another Newarker called Nick Cobb. He played outside left, I remember him. But the one I remember most was the captain. His name was Jack Fryer. He wore number 8 shirt, so he was the inside right, and he was renowned for a very hard shot. He could shoot well, and he was the first person I saw who could do the behind the foot trick of centering the ball. So you put your right leg behind your left leg and then flick the ball up. He could do that. And we used to stand behind the goal, and then we used to walk down the other end when they were attacking the other when they changed after half time. And the crowd used to be behind the goal. At that time there was basically a covered area behind the goal on Elm Avenue, and there was a stand where people could sit on the halfway line, the side near the railway. And every time Jack Fryer hit one and it went wide and everyone used to shout at him, he used to turn round and he used to give them the 2 fingers. The crowd behind the goal. And it was very funny, but I had some terrific times there, going with them. And I always remind Codge when I see him that they played once at at Boston United, who play now at a semi-professional, and were in that league, and they beat us 7-1. And Codge got in those days you could barge the goalkeeper, and poor old Codge got barged into the goal 4 times that day. So they were good days at watching Ransom Miles that was called the Central Alliance. And we used to travel to Nottingham, and I remember one of the teams was called Arnold St Mary's. Really strong teams. And Joe Boucher, I think, went on to play for Arnold St Mary's after he left Ransom Miles. And then my next memory was of amateur football in Newark, and the competitions. There were a number of teams played on a Saturday. There was a Saturday league then, and so there was Worthington Simpson, there was Balderton Wanderers, who were run by a guy called Dennis Wilson, who I worked with at Worthington Simpson for a number of years. There was Balderton Old Boys, who was run by a guy called Barry Lord. There was Thorsby Colliery, as I remember. They had a 6-foot centre forward called Tommy Peacock. Still remember these names. There was British Rail, who had Alan Burkitt. They had Trevor Bullymore. They had a guy called Needham on the wing. And I see some of them around the town still on sticks. But they were really good footballers, and there used to be some terrific competitions, cup competitions, where the semi-finals used to be on at the stadium, Elm Avenue, when there was a little stand there where you could sit. And it's not the state it is today. It's really disappointing that it's just a mess down there. But there were terrific games with these guys playing Saturday League football, which no longer happens. So that was very good. And then when I started work, I wasn't a good footballer, but I was persuaded to join Worthington Simpson Juniors, and in 1964 we won the Newark Youth League. There was a Newark Youth League at that time, and we won the league and also the Robert Burden Cup. And we had some good players. We had one notable player. His name was Alvin Coolin, and he was exceptional. He was at the time probably the best footballer in Newark of his age. And unfortunately, Alvin passed away in the COVID. And then we had Donny Hage. He played, and I still see Donny around the town. At the time, we used to travel to games on the bus, Wright's bus, and Donny Hage's dad used to drive the bus. Okay, and we had I think Alvin scored about 30 goals that season, and I think I scored about 20. And then I went into play when you got over that age, too old, went to play for the second team, and I played with a guy called Johnny Handley, who was a really good footballer, but he was the biggest moaner in the world. He was on at you all the time. And he's got 2 sons who turned out to be good footballers, Lee Handley and Jonathan Handley. They were good footballers. They played for Simpsons in later days, or Simos in later days. And then I played a few times for the first team when they were short. They had some really good footballers. Alvin was then in that team. There was Martin Rollitz, there was Donald Hage, there was George Bauer, was centre forward, and Max Phillips was the goalkeeper. Yeah, so everyone knows Max Phillips, I'm sure. Yeah, so they were good times, and it was at that time it was everyone's ambition to either play on the Ransom Miles pitch or on the Worthington Simpson pitch, because they were the 2 pitches in the ground in the town. There were other grounds in the town. It's just coming back to me. There used to be one called Curry's, and it used to be where the Cattle Market car park is now, where there was a football pitch at the back of there. We used to play some of the games, some of the cup games, and there was another ground called Castle Brewery, which was more or less next to the roundabout at the Cattle Market roundabout on the way to Muscombe. The first field, there was a football ground there, and we used to play there. And then, as part of it, I go back a bit, and one thing I forgot to say was when we won the Robert Burden Cup in front of, I don't know, about 1,000 people watching in 1964, the final. We played the Monks from Kelham Hall, and they had a team, and it was quite interesting because it was the first time that I understood that monks swore if you fouled them, and we had a minute to go and we were drawing 1-1, and the right winger was called John Lilliman, and he went down the wing and he crossed the ball in the air and he hit my head and went in, and I scored the winning goal. So that's my claim to fame. So then Worthington Simpson, when I finished, I became, sometimes was chairman of the football club. They went on to good things. They won the Not Senior Cup, and the best player, or the most famous player at the time, was a guy called Jerry Fell, Jed Fell, and he played outside right. And he was a big lad, and he was strong, had a powerful shot. He was a good footballer. He then went to play for Long Eaton, and then he moved to Brighton and Hove Albion as a 4-time professional when Peter Taylor was the manager, Peter Taylor of Brian Clough fame. And Jed was a professional for many years at Brighton and Hove Albion, and did quite well. So there were really good times. I talked about Balderton Old Boys. It was when I went to I had the misfortune to pass the 11 plus, and I went to the grammar school, and our religious education, or they called it divinity teacher, was Chris Grant. And Chris Grant played in goal for Balderton Old Boys. And then in later years, when he went had the sports shop, Grant and Green, or Grunt and Groan as they were probably called more, he played for the Newark Thursday team. So people who worked on Saturdays played football on Thursdays, and there was a Thursday league, and he was the goalkeeper. And I remember in school holidays I'd go down to Balderton playing fields, and he was playing there. So these are really good memories. These guys are not around anymore. Some of them are not around, but they were really, really good characters. The trainer, you used to have a trainer, came on with a bucket and a sponge, and you didn't get any sprays, you just got a cold sponge down your leg. Or for Worthington Simpson was a guy called Eric Hunt, okay, and we had lots of laughs with him. And also at that time at the old pavilion at Lowfields, there was a 10-foot square bath that was about, 4 foot deep, and everyone got in it at the end of the match. Yeah, everyone got in, and that was where you had your shower. There were no showers in those days. Everyone piled into this big bath, and just bad luck if you lost your soap. Yeah, so that was good. And then I just going round that we had a manager came when they were trying to make Worthington Simpson a bit better. A guy called Kenny Richmond. He came from Skegness Town to be the manager, and he made us train hard, and threw up a few times in the field while he was training us on a Tuesday night, on a cold night. There weren't floodlights or gyms or anything. He just ran up and down the pitch. And also when I became the chairman, we tried to make it a bit more of an enjoyable experience to go up there. So we used to play the match of the day theme when the teams ran out over the loudspeaker. And the secretary at Worthington Simpson of the football club was a guy called George Lambert, who did it for over 20 years. He was the secretary of Worthington Simpson Football Club. So all good experiences. Some real characters. I don't think the characters are around, not like these guys, and they just, you know, they'll never be there again. I don't think, you know, there's no Saturday football in the locally. Well, luckily Newark and Sherwood and Newark Town are trying hard, but when you got people like Billy Coombs and guys called Melvin Prosser and Martin Rollick getting stuck into them, they were good times, and I remember them well. So hopefully this little chat will keep the memory going for a little while.